Yeah, my story wasn't easy, but I survived their laughter and proved that sometimes the universe has bigger plans than we could ever imagine.
I used to hear her crying through the walls sometimes, late at night, probably stressed about bills, but since she came back, I hear her laughing on phone calls, typing on her computer. She's living now, not just surviving.
I'm Laura Davis, and this is the story of how one mysterious cruise invitation changed everything I thought I knew about my life. It was a Tuesday evening in March when everything fell apart. Or maybe when everything finally began to make sense. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills that seemed to multiply every time I looked away, when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Karen. Family dinner Sunday. Mom's making her famous pot roast. Don't bring your imaginary boyfriend this time, LOL. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might fall out of my head. At 34, I was still the family disappointment, the one who moved to Chicago with big dreams and somehow ended up working 3 part-time jobs just to afford a studio apartment that was barely bigger than my childhood bedroom closet. My family had this way of making me feel like I was still that awkward teenager who spent more time reading romance novels than dating actual people. The thing is, I did have plans. I always had plans. Big, beautiful, impossible plans that lived in the notebook I kept hidden under my mattress like some kind of teenage diary. I wanted to travel, to see the Northern Lights, to learn Italian, to write a novel, to fall in love with someone who understood that dreams weren't just pretty thoughts you kept locked away in your heart. But every time I mentioned any of these plans to my family, they'd exchange those looks. You know the ones I'm talking about. Those pitying, slightly amused looks that said, "Oh, Laura's at it again with her fantasies." Sunday dinner at my parents' house was exactly what I expected. Mom had made her pot roast, which was admittedly delicious, and Dad was holding court about his latest golf game while my brother Mike bragged about his promotion at the insurance company. Karen was showing off pictures of her twins' latest soccer achievements, and there I was, the perpetual supporting character in everyone else's success story. "So, Laura," my Aunt Patricia said, cutting into her meat with surgical precision, "still working at that coffee shop?" "It's one of my jobs," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I also work at the bookstore and do freelance editing." "3 jobs," my Uncle Bob whistled. In my day, a person had one good job and stuck with it, built a life around it. "Different times, Uncle Bob," I said, taking a sip of wine that tasted like it came from a box, because it probably did. "Maybe if you'd finished your master's degree instead of chasing those writing dreams," Mom said, not unkindly, but with that tone that suggested she'd been storing up this observation for weeks. "I'm still writing," I said, though the truth was I hadn't touched my laptop in 3 months. "And I have plans. Big plans, actually." The table went quiet for a moment, and then Mike started chuckling. "Plans? Like what, Laura? Another trip to Europe that you'll never take? Or maybe you're finally going to write that novel you've been talking about for 10 years now?" Karen added, and I could hear the affection in her voice, but also the dismissal. "I'm working on something," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "Something big. I just can't talk about it yet." The laughter started small. Just a few chuckles around the table, but it grew. Not cruel laughter, not exactly, but the kind of gentle, patronizing laughter that somehow hurt worse than outright mockery. It was the laughter of people who loved me but had absolutely no faith in my ability to surprise them. "Oh, honey," Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand. "We know you like to dream. It's one of your best qualities. But maybe it's time to focus on more realistic goals. Patricia's friend works at the bank and she says they're hiring." That's when it happened. The doorbell rang, cutting through the conversation like a fire alarm. Dad got up to answer it, grumbling about salespeople interrupting family dinner, but he came back a minute later with a confused expression and an envelope in his hand. "It's for Laura," he said, holding it out to me. Delivery guy said it was urgent. I took the envelope, my heart hammering for reasons I couldn't explain. It was thick, cream-colored paper with my name written in elegant calligraphy, Miss Laura Davis. No return address, just a small embossed logo that looked like a ship's wheel. "Open it," Karen said, leaning forward. "Don't keep us in suspense." My hands were shaking as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, also on cream-colored paper, and what looked like tickets or official documents. I read the letter once, then twice, my mouth falling open. "Laura!" Mom's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What is it?" I looked up at the faces around the table, all of them staring at me with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. It's a cruise invitation." "A what?" Mike asked. "A cruise," I said, my voice stronger now. "A 14-day Mediterranean cruise. All expenses paid. First-class accommodations." I looked down at the letter again, hardly believing the words I was reading. It says I've been selected for the inaugural voyage of the Aurora Mystique, a luxury cruise ship. It's leaving from Miami in 2 weeks. The table erupted in questions. How did I apply for this? Was it some kind of scam? Who did I know in the cruise industry? But I couldn't answer any of them because I was just as confused as they were. "Let me see that," Dad said, taking the letter from my hands. He read it over, his expression growing more serious. "This looks legitimate. The letterhead, the paper quality, even the way it's written. But Laura, you didn't apply for anything like this?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I've never even been on a cruise. I get seasick on the Staten Island ferry. It has to be a mistake," Karen said. "Or some kind of elaborate prank." But as I held the documents in my hands, something deep inside me knew this wasn't a mistake. I couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it, but I knew with the same certainty I'd known as a child that the monsters under my bed weren't real, and that my parents would always love me no matter what. This was real, and it was meant for me. "There's a phone number," I said, pointing to the bottom of the letter. "For confirmations and questions." "Call it," Mom said. "Right now. We'll get to the bottom of this." I dialed the number on speakerphone, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, smooth and professional. "Aurora Mystique Guest Services. This is Caroline speaking. How may I assist you?" "Hi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I received an invitation today for a cruise, and I'm not sure if it's legitimate. My name is Laura Davis." "Miss Davis?" Caroline said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "We've been expecting your call. Congratulations on your selection for our inaugural voyage. I have your file right here." "My file?" I asked, glancing around the table at my family's shocked faces. "Yes, you were nominated by someone who thought you would be perfect for this particular voyage. All your arrangements have been made, including flights to Miami, transportation to the ship, and of course, your suite accommodation." "Nominated by whom?" I asked. "I'm sorry, Miss Davis, but that information is confidential. Your benefactor wished to remain anonymous. I can tell you that they spoke very highly of your character and felt that this experience would be meaningful for you." I sat back in my chair, stunned. "This is really happening?" "Oh yes, Miss Davis. Very much so. The Aurora Mystique is one of the most luxurious ships in the world, and you'll be sailing through some of the most beautiful waters on the planet. Your cruise includes stops in Barcelona, Monaco, Rome, Santorini, and Istanbul, among others. You'll have access to all ship amenities, including the spa, fitness center, specialty restaurants, and exclusive entertainment." I don't understand," I said. "Why me? Sometimes the universe has its own plans, Miss Davis. I suggest you simply accept this gift and enjoy it. You deserve it more than you know." After I hung up, the dining room was silent for a long moment. Then Uncle Bob cleared his throat and said, "Well, I'll be damned." "Laura," Mom said slowly, "you're really going on a cruise?" "I guess I am," I said, and for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Excitement. Pure, unadulterated excitement. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I had to request time off from all 3 jobs, which was a nightmare of scheduling and covering shifts. I had to get my passport renewed, which involved a frantic trip to the post office and paying for expedited processing. I had to buy clothes suitable for a Mediterranean cruise, which meant spending money I didn't have on sundresses and sandals and a swimsuit that didn't make me look like I was trying to hide from the world. But the hardest part was dealing with my family's reaction. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a kind of bewildered concern. They kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Who was my mysterious benefactor? Why had I been chosen? Was I sure this wasn't some elaborate human trafficking scheme? You're just going to get on a ship with strangers and sail away to foreign countries? Karen asked during one of our daily phone calls. Laura, this is so unlike you. Maybe that's the point, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Maybe it's time I did something unlike me. But what if it's dangerous? What if something happens to you? Then at least I'll have tried, I said. At least I'll have done something brave for once in my life. The day of departure arrived faster than I expected. Dad drove me to the airport, and I could see the worry in his eyes every time he glanced at me in the rearview mirror. You know you can call us anytime, right? He said as we pulled up to the terminal. Day or night. If you need anything, if you want to come home, we'll figure it out. I know, Dad, I said, leaning over to kiss his cheek. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. And Laura, I'm proud of you. This is scary as hell, but you're doing it anyway. That takes guts. The flight to Miami was my first time on a plane in 5 years. As we lifted off from Chicago, I pressed my face to the window and watched the city shrink below us. Somewhere down there was my studio apartment, my 3 jobs, my stack of unpaid bills, and my notebook of impossible dreams. But up here, 30,000 feet above the ground, anything seemed possible. The Aurora Mystique was unlike anything I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just a cruise ship, it was a floating palace. The lobby was all marble and crystal, with a massive chandelier that threw rainbows across the ceiling. My suite was on the 7th deck, with a private balcony that overlooked the ocean. The bathroom was bigger than my kitchen back home, and the bed was so comfortable I almost cried when I lay down on it. But the most surprising thing wasn't the luxury. It was the other passengers. I'd expected typical cruise ship crowds, families with kids and retirees in Hawaiian shirts. Instead, I found myself surrounded by the most interesting people I'd ever met. There was Elena, a former ballet dancer from Russia who was now a successful art dealer in New York. There was Marcus, a documentary filmmaker from London who'd spent the last decade traveling to remote locations around the world. There was Sarah, a marine biologist who'd discovered 3 new species of deep-sea fish. There was David, a chef who'd just opened his first restaurant in San Francisco. What they all had in common, I realized after a few conversations, was that they'd all received the same mysterious invitation I had. None of them knew who their benefactor was, and none of them cared. They were all just grateful for the opportunity to experience something extraordinary. I think we're supposed to be here, Elena said on our second night at sea. We were sitting on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I don't believe in coincidences this big. What do you think the purpose is? I asked. Maybe there isn't one, Marcus said, raising his glass of wine. Maybe sometimes good things just happen to good people. Or maybe, Sarah added with a smile, the universe is trying to tell us something. I didn't know what the universe was trying to tell me, but I was listening. Every morning, I woke up in that incredible bed and walked out onto my balcony to watch the sunrise over the Mediterranean. Every day brought new sights, new experiences, new conversations that challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and the world. In Barcelona, I climbed the towers of the Sagrada Familia and felt small and infinite at the same time. In Monaco, I watched the sunset from the deck of the ship while sipping champagne that cost more than I made in a week. In Rome, I stood in the Colosseum and tried to imagine the gladiators who'd fought there 2,000 years ago. But it was in Santorini that everything changed. I was sitting alone at a cafe, watching the sun set over the caldera, when an elderly woman approached my table. She was small and elegant, with silver hair and kind eyes, and she moved with the grace of someone who'd spent her life dancing. "Excuse me," she said in accented English. "Are you Laura Davis?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Yes, I am. May I sit down? I have something to tell you." She sat across from me and smiled. "My name is Sophia Chorus. I am the one who arranged your cruise." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "You? But why?" "I don't understand." 40 years ago, she began. I was a young woman living in Chicago. I was married to a man who didn't understand my dreams, working in a job that made me feel invisible. I felt trapped, like I was living someone else's life. Something about her story resonated with me, and I leaned forward. "What happened?" "I met someone," she said. "An older woman, a stranger really. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She gave me money, enough to leave my marriage, to travel, to start over. She asked only one thing in return." "What?" "That someday when I was able, I would do the same for someone else. Someone who needed to know that their dreams were possible." I felt tears building in my eyes. "But how did you know about me?" "I didn't. Not at first. I've been watching, waiting for the right person for years. I have people who help me, who keep their eyes open for someone special. Your name came up several times." "From who?" "The woman who runs the bookstore where you work. She talked about how you light up when you recommend books to customers, how you remember what everyone likes to read. The old man who comes to the coffee shop every morning. He said you're the only person who remembers that he takes his coffee black with 2 sugars and asks about his grandchildren. Your friend from college who said you used to write the most beautiful stories." I was crying now, unable to stop the tears. "I haven't written anything in months. Writers don't stop being writers just because they stop writing," Sophia said gently. "Sometimes they just need to remember why they started." "Why me?" I asked. "Why not someone more deserving?" "Because," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "you still believe in magic. Even after everything. Even after all the disappointments and the bills and the 3 jobs and the family who doesn't understand, you still believe that something wonderful might happen. That's rare, Laura. That's precious." We talked for hours as the sun set and the stars came out. She told me about her life, about the cafe she'd opened in Athens, about the young artists she'd supported over the years, about the love she'd found with a man who encouraged her dreams instead of dismissing them. She told me about the scholarship fund she'd started for young women who wanted to travel, about the writer's retreat she'd established on a small island in the Aegean Sea. "I want you to know," she said as we prepared to part ways, "that this cruise is just the beginning. If you want it to be." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when you go home, you don't have to go back to the way things were. You can write, you can travel, you can chase those dreams you've been keeping in your notebook." "How did you know about the notebook?" She smiled. "Lucky guess. We all have notebooks, Laura. The question is whether we're brave enough to turn them into reality." The rest of the cruise passed in a blur of beauty and possibility. In Istanbul, I climbed the Blue Mosque and felt connected to centuries of human longing and faith. On the ship, I spent hours writing in the journal I'd bought in Rome, capturing not just the sights and sounds of the places we visited, but the feelings, the transformations, the slow recognition that I was becoming someone new. I also spent time with my fellow passengers, these remarkable people who'd all been chosen for reasons they were only beginning to understand. We shared meals and stories, dreams and fears. We became a family of sorts, bound together by mystery and gratitude. On the last night of the cruise, we all gathered on the deck for a farewell dinner. The ship's chef had prepared a feast, and the wine flowed freely as we watched the lights of Miami grow larger in the distance. "I don't want this to end," Elena said, and we all murmured agreement. "It doesn't have to," Marcus said. "We can stay in touch. We can visit each other." "It's not the same," Sarah said. "This has been magical. Going back to real life? But we're not going back to the same real life," I found myself saying. We're going back as different people. We're going back with proof that impossible things can happen. David raised his glass. To impossible things. To second chances, Elena added. To mysterious benefactors, Marcus laughed. To dreams that come true, Sarah said. To the courage to believe in magic, I said. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not contentment exactly, but a kind of quiet confidence. I was still Laura Davis, still the woman with 3 jobs and a stack of bills. But I was also the woman who'd been chosen for something extraordinary. I was the woman who'd climbed the Sagrada Familia and watched the sunset over Santorini. I was the woman who'd met Sofia Couris and learned that sometimes strangers can see us more clearly than our own families. The flight back to Chicago was bittersweet. I pressed my face to the window as we descended, watching the city grow larger below us. But instead of feeling like I was returning to a trap, I felt like I was coming home with tools I didn't have before. Dad picked me up at the airport, and I could see the relief in his eyes when he saw me walking toward him, tan and smiling, and obviously safe. How was it? He asked as we drove through the familiar streets of Chicago. Life-changing, I said, and I meant it. Are you going to tell us what happened? Your mother's been worried sick. I'll tell you everything, I said. But Dad? I need you to know that I'm not the same person who left 2 weeks ago. He glanced at me, and I saw understanding in his eyes. I can see that, sweetheart. You look different, stronger. That Sunday, I went to family dinner again. Same pot roast, same dining room, same faces around the table. But when Karen asked about my trip, I didn't deflect or minimize. I told them everything. About the ship, about the cities we visited, about the people I met, about Sophia and her story of transformation. So this woman just gave you a cruise because she thought you needed it? Mike asked, skeptical. She gave me a cruise because she recognized something in me that I'd forgotten about myself, I said. She reminded me that I'm allowed to dream big dreams. That's a beautiful story, honey, Mom said. But now that you're back, you need to think about practical things. Did you call Patricia's friend about the bank job? I took a deep breath. No, Mom, I didn't. And I'm not going to. The table went quiet. Laura, Dad said carefully, you still have bills to pay. I know, I said, and I'm going to pay them. But I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to write. Honey, Karen said gently, you've been saying that for years. I know I have, I said, but this time is different. This time, I have proof that impossible things can happen. I pulled out my laptop bag and set it on the table. I wrote every day on the cruise. I wrote about the places we visited, the people I met, the way it felt to watch the sunrise over the Mediterranean. I wrote about feeling small in the Colosseum and infinite on the cliffs of Santorini. I wrote about what it's like to discover that you're braver than you thought you were. That's wonderful, Mom said, but I could hear the but coming. I'm going to turn it into a book, I said before she could continue. A memoir about travel, about transformation, about the kindness of strangers. And I'm going to submit it to publishers. Laura, Uncle Bob said, the publishing industry is brutal. Do you have any idea how many people try to write books? I do, I said, and I know that most of them fail. But I also know that some of them succeed. And for the first time in my life, I believe I might be one of the ones who succeeds. The doubt on their faces was familiar, but it didn't crush me the way it used to. I'd seen too much, experienced too much, to let their skepticism diminish my newfound confidence. I'm also going to quit 2 of my jobs, I continued. I'm going to keep the bookstore because I love it, but I'm going to ask for more hours. And I'm going to use my savings to give myself 6 months to write. Your savings? Dad asked. Laura, you don't have any savings. I do now, I said and pulled out an envelope. Sophia gave me this before I left the ship. She said it was to help me get started. I opened the envelope and showed them the check. It was for $50,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mike started laughing. but it wasn't the dismissive laughter from 2 weeks ago. It was amazed laughter, the kind that comes when something is so unexpected that it breaks your brain a little bit. "Jesus Christ, Laura," he said. "You really did it. You really had plans." "I told you I had plans," I said, smiling. "You just didn't believe me." "We believe you now," Karen said, and I could see tears in her eyes. "We believe you." That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this from my new apartment, a 1-bedroom with actual sunlight and a desk where I can write without my laptop overheating. I finished my book 3 weeks ago and sent it to 5 literary agents. 3 of them have already requested the full manuscript. But even if nothing comes of the book, even if I never publish another word, I'll always have the cruise. I'll always have the memory of watching the sunrise over the Mediterranean, of climbing ancient towers and eating fresh pasta in Roman trattorias. I'll always have the knowledge that somewhere out there, people like Sophia exist, people who believe in magic and who are willing to make it happen for strangers. I still work at the bookstore, but now it's because I want to, not because I have to. I still live in Chicago, but now I have a passport and the confidence to use it. I still have that notebook of dreams, but now I also have the certainty that dreams can come true if you're brave enough to believe in them. And sometimes, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or discouraged, I think about that family dinner when everyone laughed at my plans. I think about the doorbell ringing and the cream-colored envelope with my name written in elegant calligraphy. I think about the way their faces changed when they realized that sometimes the universe really does have bigger plans than we could ever imagine. I think about Sophia, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and who gave me the gift of remembering that I'm allowed to dream big dreams. I think about the other passengers on the Aurora Mystique, who taught me that extraordinary people aren't born extraordinary. They're just ordinary people who say yes to extraordinary opportunities. And I think about the woman I was before the cruise, the one who worked 3 jobs and felt invisible, who kept her dreams hidden like shameful secrets. I think about her with compassion now, because she was doing the best she could with what she had. But I also think about her with gratitude, because she was brave enough to accept an impossible invitation, and that bravery changed everything. The invitation is still in my apartment, framed on my desk next to my laptop. Sometimes visitors ask about it, and I tell them the story of how one mysterious cruise changed my life. They usually look skeptical, the way my family did 6 months ago. But I don't mind. I know that somewhere out there are other people like me, people who feel trapped by their circumstances but who still believe in magic. And I know that someday, when I'm able, I'll do what Sophia did for me. I'll find someone who needs to know that their dreams are possible, and I'll make them come true. Because that's what happens when you survive the laughter and prove that sometimes the universe has bigger plans than we could ever imagine. You become part of the magic. You become someone who makes impossible things happen for other people. And that, I think, is the most beautiful dream of all. My name is Laura Davis, and this is my story. It's the story of a woman who thought she was ordinary until she discovered that ordinary people can have extraordinary lives. It's the story of a mysterious benefactor who saw potential where others saw only limitation. It's the story of a cruise that was really about so much more than travel. But most of all, it's the story of what happens when you're brave enough to believe that your dreams matter, even when everyone else thinks they're impossible. Because sometimes, when you least expect it, the universe proves that impossible things happen every day. You just have to be open to receiving them. And trust me, it's worth the wait.